Hey there guys, Ian here, and today I'm bringing you something a little bit special. You'll probably notice you're not actually on my main channel right now, you're actually on my old one, which I've decided to open back up to use as a kind of behind the scenes kind of special. So what I'm going to be doing on here is kind of going through my project files like as I release the video, and kind of explaining a few of the effects and then how I then put it into After Effects to kind of do the final tweaking and color correction, just so you get an idea of like workflow and just how to do some of the bit of the harder effects, so to speak. So this one was quite a basic one. This was for Soar Sniping. You've just watched the intro on my main channel and probably found your way over here. Or you're one of the subscribers that stayed stuck to this channel, and well done to that. The link for the actual intro will be in the description below. So the first thing we're going to do is jump into the project file in Cinema 4D. It's not that complicated, even though it might look like a bit of a mess. Basically the first scene was just quite a long camera, and all it did was rotate around a bit. Now to kind of give it a bit of atmosphere, and if we render that out, hopefully it doesn't take too long or doesn't stop halfway. As you can see, it doesn't look great. It's because a lot of kind of intro work is in the post-production. You kind of got to imagine what it will look like with a bit of color correction, bit of background, and all that. So right now all I was thinking was, were the reflections good? Is it too dark that you won't be able to see anything? And what you got to remember is this black background might not be completely black in the final one, because if you render it with an alpha channel you can change this to whatever you like. And so the first shot was that, and then for the main thing we have this effect here, which in itself looks very simple, but I actually got a lot of inspiration from a director known as Hitchcock. This effect is known as the dolly zoom or the Hitchcock zoom, to try and give it a kind of vertigo feel. So as you can see, the logo doesn't actually change at all during this, but it looks like it's elongating. And this is actually a very simple effect to achieve. I thought about doing it before, but in this case it actually worked quite well. To do it, basically you have a few keyframes on your camera, and the main thing here is the focal length. And so if we just go out of the camera here, and if I just solo that just by unchecking all the other cameras, you can see here we have our camera, and as it goes in, it zooms in, but you can also see that the camera actually widens as well. And when we look back in here, you can see as you zoom in, basically what you're doing is you're physically moving the camera forwards, but at the same time you're zooming out. If any of you have watched Top Gear, you'll probably recognise this effect quite a bit. That's actually where I got the thought for it. I was quite interested in how they had achieved that, and with a bit of research I found out how to do it with an actual camera, and then quite recently I found out how to do it virtually here. So this is the first shot. It's quite effective. It gives a really nice kind of different effect. And then the second camera, all this does is rotates around. I find the best way to do this is to actually change the keyframes to linear. That way you get a constant rotation rather than it kind of fading in, fading out sort of. And it just looks a lot nicer. You can make it so it's just a constant velocity, and I find that's the best way to do it. And then finally the third camera is simply it zooming out. Again, if you change it to linear, you can easily make it so it just lasts. I find a big problem with the spline keyframes is as it gets near here, it almost zooms in again. So this is a great way just to keep it flowing nicely and very smoothly, and probably exactly what you want it to do. Now I also set up, or did I? For the first two cameras I also had depth of field turned on, and this just gives it a really nice effect. A lot of the times in the render settings I'll use a multi-pass for the depth, but in this instance I found it looked a lot nicer with a built-in depth of field. And the difference is the built-in depth of field sometimes will look nicer, but you can't change it after you've rendered it out. It's part of the actual image. If you render with a multi-pass, however, you actually use After Effects to do the depth of field, and so you can change the focus points a lot better in case you haven't focused exactly where you want it to. I actually have a tutorial for it on my main channel, but in this case I just had, if I zoom out of the camera, just a rear depth, and so you can see the white line here is the focus, which kind of zooms in, and then this red line at the back is the rear depth, and so pretty much it's a gradual depth of field until the red line, and then it kind of blows out again. And so if we render this, it might take a little while, but straight out of the render this looked really nice. This is when I knew that the lighting was right, the materials looked good, just because the depth looked amazing. I'll just let this render here, so I'll just quickly pause it. So we have our scene rendered here. You can see in the background we have these really nice realistic depth of field, and I didn't want any front depth because I wanted all of this to actually be in focus, and so I just made it blur afterwards, and that worked out really well. As for the actual object, the actual logo itself, it was quite easy to make. It was mainly just splines, but I also had my lights, which, if I can find here, all these lights I actually saved as its very own project file, and in one of my latest tutorials on my main channel I show how you can then export all these lights into After Effects directly, so that you can actually you don't have to track all the flares onto it. It will do it automatically, and this is a really easy way just to increase the speed of your workflow. So that's it for Cinema 4D. The next thing is After Effects, and as you can see straight away, it looks a lot different to the actual render itself. So I believe this was the first shot, and you can see here we have our flares that are being tracked by the lights, which I've hidden. Yep, there we go. So here are all our lights, and then the flares are actually tracked onto it. And if you click randomize lights here, all the flickering and kind of intensity change very slightly, so it gives it a slightly more realistic look. And I really like this just very subtle movement in the distance to just give it a bit of atmosphere. And then in the actual main project we had here, I actually put some grain in the background to give it a kind of cinematic look almost, and for the colour correction it had just a bit of curves just to kind of lift that black up a bit. Again, it's more of a cinematic look, and I always think it looks a little bit better. The second shot, we have a bit of colour correction in here using Magic Bullet looks, and that gets these kind of atmospheric strokes here, and we also have just a flare up here just to make the background slightly more interesting. It's really important not to make the light too strong. Normally a good eye is to make it weaker than some of the highlights on your actual logo. That way it won't draw too much attention away from the logo itself. And then for this shot, again, just a flare up here. Pretty much the same colour correction as the second shot. And you can see these really nice blur in the background. And what I really love is the subtle bits of colour on the actual material, giving it this really nice kind of, it doesn't stand out too much, but enough that you do notice it. And then the final shot was a bit more complicated, but nothing too drastic. It just had a few kind of stock footages of some smoke from the Action Essentials pack, and also a bit of dust coming from the logo itself, and they wanted their name written here as well, and just a couple of subtle flares on the top and bottom of the logo. And I actually did a cell render as well on this logo, so you can see the lines coming here. I did experiment with flares attached to here as well, but it distracted it from the actual logo itself, so I felt this was a lot nicer. And again, we just have the flare at the top just to make the background slightly more interesting. So this is kind of how I did my intro. I hope you kind of took a bit from it, and if you want to see these for a lot of my projects in the future, just let me know. I think this is quite a good idea. I can go more in depth in certain effects. This one didn't really have any actual effects done on it, it was just camera movements. So if you wish to know anything more, just leave a comment below and I'll be sure to check them out. So this is the start of a kind of new series almost, and this is me reopening my old channel, as I didn't want to spam my main channel with hundreds of videos. So please just let me know if you like this or not, and I'll be sure to see you soon.